Researchers at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln are trying to learn more about how hail affects young plants during the growing season. Hail damage can cause significant economic losses for producers of corn, soybeans, wheat, and other crops. In 2016, hail was responsible for 35% of total crop insurance indemnity payments in Nebraska. That's according to USDA Risk Management Agency data analyzed by UNL Ag Econ Assistant Professor Corey Walters. The portion was slightly lower the previous year at 27%, but according to a USDA report released this week, the share across the country was much smaller at only 11% in 2016 and even lower at 7% for the U.S. from 2001 to 2015. Justin McMechan is part of a Nebraska Extension team studying plant survivability by using a hail machine to injure and track the growth of corn and soybeans. We talked with Justin at a soybean management field day earlier this summer and began by asking when hail events are most likely to occur in Nebraska.
About a third of all hail events that we get during the growing season occur during, roughly the early half of the growing season when there's a lot of options for replants. And so it's an important time of the year. And if we look at a map of hail days in the United States over the course of a year, we get greater than 7 hail days a year in Nebraska. And so that's 1-inch size hail or greater within 25 miles of a location. So unfortunately, a lot of growers in our state do experience hail.
If growers have attended one of the events at NREC, they might have seen you with your hail machine. Tell me what that is and why you have it.
Yeah, so not something you typically hear about, but we do have a simulated hail machine. It was actually created or just recently built here in 2016 and 2017 from a machine that was built in 1986 called a Hail Razor. And so we've deemed ours the Hail Razor 2.0, a upgraded version. And the reason we deemed it 2.0 is the 1986 hail machine was really a demonstration machine. So it propelled ice at 170 miles per hour, was great for showing the impacts of hail damage, but we really needed the research components, the parameters behind it, to properly study the impacts on both early and late season hail damage to both corn and soybeans. So this new machine takes into account wind speed using a pitot-static tube, which you find on an airplane, so yeah, speeds are pretty fast. And then we also have an optical RPM sensor that measures the rotation of an auger that feeds in the ice into that wind vane. And so this gives us a lot of parameters in the field that we can use and put over those plots to know we're doing the same thing each time. So it really is a unique machine in its capability to create these consistent hail events.
At today's event, you showed pictures of plants and asked growers to decide whether or not they were still alive or whether they would survive. Why is that decision so hard?
Yeah, because it's complicated. So what I showed was really a unifoliate stage soybean plant and different levels of defoliation. And so I showed the unifoliate leaves missing and the cotyledonary storage organs missing. And then I also showed nodes cut off, so missing those unifoliates as well as missing the cotyledonary nodes. And when we actually just got to a totally defoliated plant and nodes were present, growing points were present, growers were saying, well, those plants look dead to me. And so that was an important take-home point, is as long as there's a viable growing point, you can still get a full plant out of that. They'll often have a very different structure. If a grower did receive hail earlier this year and they go to those soybean fields, they may see 2 stems that come out directly from the bottom of that plant. But it's important that they take that consideration and wait to make it, because I did tell them that even though both nodes are present, those may not be viable plants. And the issue with that is that it's stem breakage. The plant will still be upright, but it's been essentially broken off and all the vascular tissue's been destroyed. Those plants will not recover, but it's going to take 7 days to really be comfortable in making that estimation. So that's why we tell them to wait.
Later on in the season, what kind of challenges can arrive when it comes with disease?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges, early season and late. For corn, the early season considerations are really bacterial pathogens that we worry about. We tackled this in 2014 looking at Gauss's wilt. And we didn't try and mediate the problem. We used resistant and susceptible varieties to look at that, but they're so heavily damaged from the hail event, we just didn't see a response, resistant or susceptible. But what our goal was, more or less, was to say to a grower, okay, if a bacterial pathogen was present, at what point following that hail event, could you say, oh, I know it's here and now it's part of my evaluation method? And so we were trying to determine that. For soybeans, a little more complicated. There are some bacterial pathogens that are in soybeans, but we get a lot of recommendations or situations from growers where they ask, well, should I apply a fungicide? And fungal pathogens are really not a component in hail damage. Bacterial pathogens are. And there have been studies that have been done in 2016 by Sisson that looked at basically, should we apply a fungicide at R3 if we receive hail at R1 or R4? prior to the hail event or afterwards, and they didn't see an economic yield response from that. Slight bump in yield, about 1.5 bushels, but not enough to pay off.
Overall, do you think when it comes to assessing hail damage and trying to decide whether or not to replant, are we learning more? Do we know more than we knew 5 years ago or so?
We are learning a lot, and that machine I talked about earlier really represents a new phase for us in hail damage and better understanding it. Our 2015 study that we ran was looking at variation in plant damage. So plants are alive, but they, some may be cut off at ground level as a result of hail. Others are, just leaf damage. And that variation in the canopy, we're trying to understand that as situations get more complicated in replants. We're comparing that to traditional methods that NCIS is using. And so we're really on the verge of utilizing technologies as well, like drones and UAVs, to get a really objective evaluation to hail damage. That's something I think that growers as well as the National Crop Insurance Service support. It's just a matter of getting something that's economically viable for both parties.